So let me talk a little bit more about your speaker for this session. Jeremy Johnson has been at the forefront of design and user experience for years with the passion for what's next. Directing user experience for international brands, Jeremy has a knack for connecting design, development, and business, leading teams from ideation to launch. He has extensive experience with technology, travel, gaming, and any number of gadgets. So please welcome Jeremy.
Thank you. That sounded good. I wonder if I wrote that or not. All right, so this is Designing for Sensors and the Future of Experiences. My name is Jeremy. My Twitter is Jeremy Johnson. Feel free to chat me. That's not me. Hold on. That's me. There I am right there. I am the guy there in the middle. I've worked for a number of local but large brands in the area, and I do a lot of user experience work. But what I'm really passionate about is the future. I've always had this really just passion for what's coming next. And in fact, what you see in the background here is Back to the Future 2. How many Back to the Future series fans do we have here? All right, and if number 2 is your favorite, put your hands up. No, okay, that's actually lower than I thought. And 2 is always my favorite because it's really interesting to see how people vision the future and then later on go back and see what they get right and what they get wrong. And there's actually job. You could actually be a design futurist, right? What kind of cool job title is that? And in fact, Bruce Sterling, who I've been able to see at South by Southwest a couple of times, used to live in Austin. I'm not sure if he still does. Kind of has that title as a design futurist. So he's a science fiction writer, and writing about science fiction, obviously, you are thinking and supposing things that are happening sometime in the future, right? And he has this good quote: "Design and futurism are not the same thing. Design is a method of action, and futurism is a method of vision," which I agree with. But in general, I'm fans of new things coming out, whether it's a new phone or a new tablet or whatever that Samsung Note thing is. A new watch. Who's here is a Pebble backer? Do we have any more Pebble backers here? Mine is on order. Hopefully they deliver that thing. Whether it's a new device to make your computer see, whether it's to get your house more into this century, or it's disrupting some long-held business model. These are all things that are really cool and I'm really interested and really passionate about. So tell me, who did this? Who made these things? Nothing? Who? You did. Is there, designers, right? Designers make these things, right? And in general, you guys have picked the right career path if you're here, right? You all have boxes of money under your chair right now from your career path that you've chosen. Because it's not the business people, right? There wasn't a guy who said, let's figure out how to monetize thermostats in the house. That didn't happen, right? These aren't the guys that Alan Cooper wrote about in Inmates Running the Asylum. They're not building these things, right? It's you. Marketing, engineers, designers, product owners. Look, I even have social media experts up there. And really more than you in general, it's the 2012 version of you. And it's this version of you that's into things like design thinking, where it's about combining empathy for context of problems, creativity and generation of insights and solutions, and rationality to analyze and fit solutions to the context. And if you're interested in design thinking, by the way, tomorrow there is a movie actually in this room. It's the Texas premiere of a documentary called Design Thinking, which would be excellent, and it's free with your ticket. It's a 2012 version of you that believes in user-centered design. It's a 2012 version of you that believes in prototyping and iterating. It's the 2012 version of you that reads about design on the cover of business magazines. It's the 2012 version that has rock stars as designers. Who is this guy? Yes, that's right. Not only is he a rock star, he's actually a knight. He's a sir, right? He's going to come at you with a sword. So design is big. Design is huge. In fact, I think in the first session, they said there was a drinking game when someone said the word designer, so design. But in general, people today, kind of in the job market, will call this user experience or UX. Here's one of the very, very many UX-related job websites that are out there today. It's funny, they have a UX UI designer for information display applications. That sounds exciting. Senior UI, visual designer, associate director of user experience, UI, UX, can't make up their mind, designer, interaction designer, web designer, visual designer, app designer. And in fact, Jared Spool recently said, it's a great time to be a designer. This year, he actually said, the Pebble watch has raised over $6 million on Kickstarter. The Nest thermostat sold out in the first few days of the production run, sold out in the first production run in a few days. Square is using design to rethink the finance industry. Mainstream business magazines are writing about the need for designers. And I thought it was interesting in the examples that he actually picked. It was the Pebble watch, the Nest thermostat, and the Square, which to me are actually all more sensor-based devices, which I'll talk about. These aren't iPad apps. These aren't new pieces of hardware. All the hardware is part of it. And also, he says, people at the boardroom level are paying attention to the value of design. Experience design is more mission critical than ever before. And for bonus points, can someone tell me what this photo is? It's Jay-Z planking on a million. Thank you. And I'm not trying to discredit the originators, right? I mean, the web was built and has been here for many years, and it was originally created by the development community. And we should also look to the past of designers and design companies that really try to fit form and function together. But it's really hard to take some kind of a new technology like a computer or like the web and merge it with really good functional design. And I'll take phones as an example, right? So we had the Motorola flip phone, which was actually a pretty cool phone for its time, right? It did everything you needed to do. It was small, fit in your pocket. The Razor, when the Razor came out, there were articles talking about how designers and engineers were finally working together and they could actually create a phone this small. And now it's moved from hardware to software, right? Today's phones are really just glass screens, and we're able to create this really interesting, innovative software to put on these phones. And it's funny because actually when I first was Googling for photos, I was thinking of the photo of the old guy with the big phone. I think you've all seen. I actually found this photo instead. And I thought, one, he has my haircut. And two, I think I have that shirt actually. So and then of course here's a photo that I was looking for that I think we've all seen. And what I thought it's funny how this photo looks so odd and out of place. Right? Is this photo also going to look that odd and out of place at some future point in time? Right? How do we know? Right? Things change, right? They change over time, right? That's just how it happens. In fact, I was recently looking at the SpaceX mission control. When you first look at this, you might think this is some kind of before and after. It's actually not. These were both taken at the exact same time. NASA mission control still looks like exactly like it did back in the Apollo mission days, which is kind of funny. Whereas the new SpaceX mission control obviously has flat screen monitors and computers. I'm not sure what they're doing with all that paper at NASA. But as UX designers and developers and product owners, we had desktop apps, we had web apps, we had rich internet applications, we had mobile apps. We're doing touch-based design. What's next, right? What's that next thing that's coming? So here we go. This is it. I'm putting my bets on this. I'm just kidding. No, I don't know. Maybe I'm kidding. Well, so this is patent number 100,079,604. Who's this patent from? Google, that is correct. Google, that's a well-drawn patent. These patents are crazy. But to me, the thing that I notice is that there's software, there's hardware, and there's sensors, and these things are starting to merge together. And actually, if I were to actually place my bets, I would say this is where it's actually heading, and this is what we're going to talk about. So things are moving fast. Things are hard to predict, but as designers, we own this. No one else is making these things but us, right? So let's talk about some software trends. So there was a recently unearthed video of Steve Jobs. Yes, that is Steve Jobs there, with more hair. And he was quoted saying, "What I see is more and more software is getting integrated into hardware." He said this in 1980. So let's listen to a little clip of this.
Where the technology's not there to get it into hardware. That's all I can think of. So, and what I see happening is that more and more software is getting integrated into hardware. Yesterday's software is today's hardware. So, those two things are merging, I think. And the line between hardware and software is going to get finer and finer and finer and finer. And one of the ways that we're approaching the problem of how to remove the barrier is to try to look ahead a few years and make some predictions as to where the technology will be, both hardware and software technology, and how they're going to be merged together, and at the same time looking at very carefully looking at the kinds of high-level tools that our customers are going to need.
That was 1980, and to me, he basically just described the iPhone, right, which is pretty amazing. And in fact, Woz was also quoted in 1977 as saying, "To me, a personal computer should be a small, reliable, convenient to use, and inexpensive." You could argue about the inexpensive part, but otherwise it sounds like he's describing the iPad, right? And so with these things, with this software becoming the hardware, there is this new future that's been supposed where everything's touch. Everything is touch. And in fact, Microsoft has done a series of these videos where basically everything is a screen. They've done many of these videos. I'm going to show a clip of one. This is actually pretty old. So there we go. Something's being projected on the floor in front of her. She has a pair of glasses. This was before Google's project that's translating the audio for her. Every window is a screen. Every window is a smart screen. She has a hologram. She can draw a hologram. That sounds practical. Here's her travel hub. She looks out the window. It knows who's looking out the window. She's driving to the hotel. The hotel knows that she's in the area. She's literally checking in. She gets the key. The doorman, who also has a screen because everything is a screen. Right, and actually, that's kind of come true a little bit, right? A lot of things have become screens, and it's really interesting to see what we've been able to do with something like the iPad, for instance. I mean, the iPad can do some really amazing and interesting things with just software acting like the hardware. And it's actually kind of funny because Apple has kind of adopted this where they actually kind of try to mimic kind of real world things that we're used to, and actually has a term which I'm not going to try to pronounce because I'll butcher that. But Microsoft, on the other hand, is actually taking a digital first approach to this new world of software, where they say the innovation here is the fluidity of the experience and the focus on the data without using traditional user interface conventions of Windows and frames. So Windows has now gone away from the Windows and frames, although it's still called Windows, which confuses me because it's called Windows 8. But they've actually done a really good job, and it's really brave of them, right? So they have a interface that works on all their digital products. It works on phones, it works on tablets, it works on desktops, and it works on the Xbox gaming devices. And Google's trying this as well. So it's about how you get your software on all these different screens. And the most amazing thing I've ever seen on an iPad right here. I'm joking. But the iPad can be a musical instrument. It can be, I mean, you've seen the Apple commercials, right? It does pretty cool, interesting things with just software. All right, so now let's talk about some sensors, right? So a sensor is a device which receives or responds to a signal. It could be motion, sound, movement, light, temperature, touch. Who here has a censored device on them right now? Okay, I would say anyone who has an iPhone, anyone who has a fuel ban, anyone that has, the iPhone can detect movement with the accelerometer, it could detect light with the ambient light detector, it could detect audio, right? So everyone really probably has some, even if you had a MacBook with you, the MacBook actually has a sensor in it to detect certain things. So we have all these devices that will respond to these sensors, and it's funny because Microsoft, again, before they were pretty sure the future was going to be all about touch, all of a sudden when the Kinect came out, which is a very popular sensor in my opinion, came out, now they decided, well, actually we were wrong about everything being a screen, now everything's going to be a sensor, and they produced a video around that.
We started with a sensor that turned voice and movement into magic.
Xbox, play.
And we thought, this will be fun to play with. And it was.
And so it could detect your voice, it could detect your
Something
movements.
amazing is happening.
Very intricate
the world
movements.
Is starting to imagine things we hadn't even thought of. Unexpected things. Helpful things.
Which they've actually built a prototype of that at the surgeon.
Beautiful things. Inspired things. Which is why, even though the world keeps
so this is a case where the world is detecting you, right? You're moving with the world, and the world is detecting what you're doing.
The same thing.
Great video. Bonus points. What song was that a rendition of? Pixels, Where's My Mind? Or Pixels. Pixies, yeah, sorry, that was bad. But the truth is, it's probably going to be a mix of both, right? It'll probably be a mix of touch, and it'll be a mix of traditional things. It'll be a mix of sensors. In fact, recently I had a friend who went on what she called a UX field trip in London to a company that claims they pioneer creative 3D technology, and they had some really cool stuff. So they had, like, here is an iPad. This is probably more of an augmented reality type thing, which I'm actually kind of unsure where that sits in the scheme of software, sensors, and hardware. But here you go. You have a person. With the iPad, you're able to see the skeletal structure. That's pretty cool. This is a case where you're using a pen and it's giving you force feedback of the object that you're playing with the pen. Here's a case where the surface table was not enough. They had to add the 3D glasses, so now it's also in 3D, right? So they had to take it a notch up. And then I thought, you know what that looks like? That looks like this, right? So who's seen the Avengers, right? Has everyone seen the cool stuff in the Avengers? Right? It looks okay. That looks. Although she has that Bluetooth headset on, I don't know if that would make it or not. I mean, wow. All right, that's not that different. This one's kind of crazy here, this wheel thing. But when you look at these next to each other, you're like, oh wow. Well, actually, maybe we are moving in the right direction, and maybe we do have some interesting prototypes that could actually be produced as products that we use every day. And in fact, Jacob Nielsen actually did a Alertbox, usability newsletter on the Kinect when it first came out in 2010, talking about some of the good things it's doing and some of the pitfalls. But he's also right to point out that there were 20 years lapsed between the invention of the mouse in '64 and the first commercially feasible mouse based on base computer, which was the Mac in 1984. So 20 years went from prototype to launching of an actual product that us here are able to use. But it's funny because with the Kinect, which has only been out for a couple years now, they actually have there's actually something called interaction choreography. So this can actually be a job path for you now. Frog Design has put this together. And when I heard of interaction choreography, I thought of this, and then I thought, wow, like jazz hands will be the Comic Sans of interaction choreography, right? And like and as designers, how do we not get people to do this? But it's designing for this new layer of interaction, which requires new thinking around dexterity and ergonomics and whether someone might feel silly or offensive with certain gestures, right? These are things that, I don't know, I haven't really thought about being an application designer, right? But there's 19 million of these guys out here, and they're selling more and more every day, and they actually have a version that's for Windows, and I'm sure before long it'll be integrated into a Windows laptop. In fact, the Gravity Center with AT&T Foundry actually had a Kinect Hack Day, and it was a packed house of developers wondering what cool things can we do with the Kinect. And so some designer insight here. This was from Teen Lax. So don't try to figure out how to cram Kinect into an existing UI paradigm. Instead design a UI paradigm that's from the ground up, intended to exploit the Kinect's functionality. And you could also obviously replace Kinect with anything. And I think that's what actually Microsoft is trying to do with a lot of their Metro interface stuff, right? They're trying to build something from the ground up. So who here has a fuel band? Any fuel bands in the house? There's a couple, all right. So the fuel band is this really cool sensor that basically tracks what you're doing all day long. It's tracking your steps, how many calories you're burning, and it's not only is it tracking you as a sensor-based device, but it's actually connected as well, and it connects back to your phone, and it connects back to your computer. And so something to look at there might be for fashion, right? Like, do they look silly wearing this band? Will someone of a certain age, race, or gender use this when you're creating a product? The Nest, right? The Nest actually just recently has been launched in the Apple stores. They're going to start selling this in the Apple stores, which Apple's very picky about what they sell, and two, I'm sure this will help it gain further adoption. But when thinking from designers of designing these new interaction patterns and UI patterns, what do they know from click and touch interfaces? Is there something more natural? How do you unlearn and imagine what can be from something that's been there like a thermostat for many, many years? There are things like the Fitbit, which is similar to the Fuel Band, which kind of clips on you and tells you. Any Fitbit users here? Okay, a couple Fitbit users. It tells you how many steps you've done, has a little bit of kind of gamification there where you have a little flower growing telling you if you're doing well or not. And actually, there's a privacy element to this one. So, what is helpful and what is potentially scary? Can you keep a snapshot for marketing purposes? How do they know what you're sharing? Because Fitbit actually had a thing where you could actually log your sexual activity as well as other means, and people didn't realize that their profiles were public, actually. So, so this guy down here had moderate effort, started at 10:45, 20 minutes, So, I mean, you could actually see the Fitbit users and their sexual history, but this is a privacy concern when these sensors are tracking everything you do, right? Where is that going? And actually, recently, Microsoft came out and they have this Kinect sensor kind of ad network kind of thing where they're trying to come up with ways that basically your TV does now see you. I think when I was a very young child, for some reason, I thought the TV was watching me. It is actually watching you now when you have a Kinect, and you can interact with ads. And what does that mean? Because the Kinect has such fine grain where it can detect if you're male, female. It can detect age. It can detect many different things. And do you want them to know that? Do you want a TV commercial to know that about you? And then there's the Pebble Watch, so which we mentioned earlier. Great app ecosystem coming, good price point, and kind of what I'll call life sensors, things that help you throughout the day. Again, it has sensors around how far you're walking, and really it's just up to the developers of what these sensors could actually do. It's a very connected device. There's a new one on Kickstarter that just started called the Cuckoo Watch, which basically has more limited display options, but it has some benefits as you don't have to charge it. It can actually just work on a regular battery and still be connected, but does have some limited sensor type items, but has great battery life, simple display, connected device. And then if that's too much for you, there's something called the Mute Watch. So if you really want the simplest watch possible, this watch actually has no display, no buttons. It does everything through sensor. So you actually tap the watch in different ways to get it to do different things. And if you want that, it will not display anything and basically just look like a bracelet. So totally sensor-based interaction when using this watch. There are no buttons. And when talking about screen resolution on small or large devices, what's the maximum amount of objects you could fit on a screen? What's the minimum size of an object? Do you even need a screen in the case of the watch? And then the 3DS. How many people have a 3DS in here? What's the adoption of? All right, so that's the most so far. Obviously, probably more geared towards kids, but the 3DS actually has a pedometer built in it. And my son had one of these, and I didn't realize, but it's actually tracking when he travels with it, and actually will tell you like, oh, today you went really far, and actually gives you kind of little gifts if you go a certain distance, right? So it's tracking you, and it logs, and you can actually see how far you've gone with this. And there's things like ergonomics, like is it comfortable to hold? What age will people use? Are people with disabilities, can they use it? What's a common movement versus uncommon movement, and how long will they interact with the device?
I am the latest and greatest in next generation public guidance and advertising. I never take a break. Don't charge
So the TSA is going to lease some virtual assistants in the airport. As she states, they do not sleep, they don't take breaks, and they have 9.999% uptime. But this is something that responds to your voice, it responds to seeing you. Basically, it's a glorified TV cut out in the shape of a woman. But then you got to think about distance and environment, like how far do you need to stand? Different people from different cultures feel more comfortable standing at different feet away. How far do they think they need to stand? Environment, design of the area, is it too loud? Can the thing hear you? Eyesight, size of the UI. So these are all things we need to think about when designing these kind of sensor-based, hardware-based things that are in environments. And here's a cool one as well. I love this photo. But let's take a look. So basically, they're using that iPad as a window into a virtual world. And then they have these gloves. The gloves obviously have some kind of touch points on there. It's tracking the touch points. But they're able to manipulate things, and they actually have a version where you can have multiple people manipulating the same types of objects. Again, these are all things that work in some capacity today, right? How far are we from the future? So in 3D space, is it close or far away? What do we infer from spatial positioning? Can you get people to interact with 3D space on a 2D screen? A lot of these kind of Kinect-based screens, it's kind of, it gives you kind of feel like you can move in 3D space, but obviously it's only a 2D screen, right? So taking Kinect a step further, this is the Leap gesture system, which is actually, I think, $70, which to me is fairly reasonable for what this does. And I think they're shipping sometime later this year. Does anyone have one of these on pre-order? A couple people. Where it's really, really high fidelity, fine grained control, down to, you saw you had a pencil before, or interaction with the computer. And again, it's only limited to really what us as designers will come up with, right, as software for these types of sensors that we have access to now. It's called what is it called? It's called the Leap Motion. Yeah, very cool. Very small little device sits there. It's funny because they didn't use the Kickstarter route. They're just straight up pre-ordering it. And then looking at demographics. So they did a test recently on driving, and they found that young people perform better with more information being thrown at them. Older people rather had the audio clues, but both sets really like the touch feedback of the steering wheel, which is actually something we lose in a lot of these sensor-based devices, which is also something to think about when if us as humans like very tactile things and like to touch things, what happens when we're not actually touching things anymore? And then there's this guy we talked about earlier. This is going to happen, right? This is not going to happen. Come on. This person is not wearing this glasses. Let's take a look.
Meet me in front of Strand Books at 2.
It's recognizing your voice, it's recognizing your eye movements. So you can actually do eye-based, I guess, gestures to control the device.
Oh man, really?
Obviously it has GPS, it knows where you are.
Hey there, guy. Hey there, little guy. Sweet. Remind me to buy tickets for Monsieur Gano tonight. Where's the music section?
I would say this one is further from reality than
this is it.
some of the other ones we've seen.
Is Paul here yet? Huh. Hey, dude. How's it going?
Want to go check out that new place I was telling you about?
Sure.
This truck's really good.
Hey, just a second. Cool.
Good to see you again.
Thanks, man.
It's got a new place in Offset City.
See you, dude. Whoa, cool. Take a photo of this. Share it to my circles. Oh, I'm running late. Music, stop.
Hi, what's up?
Hey,
Hey.
you want to say something cool?
Yeah, sure. Is that a ukulele?
Yep. Okay, here goes.
So a very cool world. And they claim they've been working on this for years, and they actually have a prototype, just to show you real quick.
Okay, what are you wearing? What's on your head?
This will be the first question everyone says to you when you're wearing this thing. What are you wearing?
It's a little project I've been working on. It's kind of one of my main
Doesn't he
focuses
look
at Google
cool?
now that I've shifted to doing more R&D. And the idea is that you want to be free to experience the world without futzing with like a phone.
Right.
So, for example, just now you maybe didn't notice, but I already took a picture of you, and I have a
love
picture
that.
of you, and
I
you're
just took a
making
picture.
actually eye contact with me
Oh, I
in the
just did it
picture.
again.
If I had whipped out a phone, like this and done this, like it would have been very different.
Yeah, well, how do I know you're not making that up? What
I'll
is-
email it to you after.
So you're able to, so literally you're able to see the image you just photographed.
Yeah, yeah.
Right back on. Does it reflects on the, let's take a look.
Oh, I might need to,
What is it?
hang on, no, I'm just,
So you don't have to push anything? What did you do to actually make that work?
I'm operating it backwards is not something
So
I'm
he
used
doesn't
to,
answer
so
that
don't
question.
push
Like,
the
what
button
eye movement did he do
So
to
this
take a
side?
photo?
All right.
And get the nose.
There it is.
Yeah, sorry, that's somebody's finger, and they had to push the button, but that's the picture.
Fascinating.
Here, that's the
That's
picture.
me.
See that?
All right, so that's pretty cool, but it's funny because we went from everything is a screen to everything is a sensor. Now Google says everything is a view, right? Like I don't want sensors around me. I don't want phones and devices. I want everything to be a view. But the thing that's common across these is that everything is seamlessly connected, right? So he always knows where his friends are. His friends can call him. In all these situations, everything was always connected, always knew who you were and where you were and what you were doing, which is going to take sensors, right? There's going to be some sort of sensors doing that, right?
First, put on your Bandy brand adhesive bandage featuring the Muppets. Then scan it with your iPhone or iPad.
So we're trying things. We're playing with this technology right
You can
now, right?
even
Like
swing
there are some
curtains.
more useful and less useful things to do with this. But you have a device. The device sees something, interacts with that.
She's so girly. Miss Piggy wants you to take a picture. It's time to take a picture.
But it has a cool goal, right? The goal is to get your kids to wear bandages, which they don't always want to do. So that's actually kind of cool. The Wii U, which is a new Wii system coming out, and in fact, the video game conference E3 is going to be, I think, this week or next week. They have moved to the next version is going to keep the Wii remote that they have, which kind of started a lot of actually the sensor-based kind of prototyping, and now they actually have a tablet that goes along with it, and they actually had some patents where it shows you, taking things off one screen and moving them to another screen, right?
Virtual scenes of architectural models using Xeron as a camera. When you draw a 3D path in the air and release the Xeron, it is sent back to its initial position and then moved along the previously recorded 3D trajectory.
So this is a ball being suspended with magnets, and you can move it around. It remembers and it has sensors detecting it, right? There's an interesting interface. This is a really, really cool and I'm sure expensive sandbox. So where they have actual sand, so there's something that we understand that is tactile, right? But as you move it, it's projecting on top of it topographical map type, visuals on it. So it's kind of like, SimCity or But so it's obviously some kind of sensor that's sensing depth, right? So it has to be really good at sensing what the depth is at that time. So Microsoft actually does have a prototype of the one they had in the video, and they were talking about for surgeons, for instance. Obviously they can't touch things; they need to keep their hands clean, and so it's a way for them to kind of view some of the data that they're used to looking for, just using gesture-based interactions right on the screens.
Composer and creative developer who's been working with the Kinect since April 2011. A friend of mine showed me people doing some interesting things with the Kinect, and I was pretty impressed. So. As a project of mine, I wanted to build some kind of interface that I could construct different control mechanisms to use the human input and movement to activate notes and trigger events musically. So the software I've developed basically lets me build a whole bunch of different events and actions that can get information from the Kinect for your hands positions and your body's positions, and then convert that into music. And the way that it does that is you can virtually split up the space that you move your hands into separate zones, and each one of those zones might be associated with a chord or a note or a scale or something like that. So then as you pass your hands through those zones, you can change which note or chord or scale that you're playing. In the late 90s, the Melbourne Town Hall was retrofitted with MIDI, which is a digital.
So it's up to us, right? I would consider him a designer and developer. He took a sensor which doesn't really have any purpose other than just sense what you're doing, and he's designed something unique and interesting with it. There's a town, actually I forget where this is, but they're calling it the world's first Wikipedia town, where every building in the museums, every object in the museum, everything is marked with a Wikipedia article and a QR code. So again, you have a device that can detect things. You can scan the QR code and get more information about the world around you, right? It's kind of a simple way to do it.
In this example, a user controls a mobile music player using touch gestures on their own body. It is not inconceivable that one day, mobile devices could have no screens or buttons and rely exclusively on the body as the input surface.
So where the guy from Google was mentioning like, oh, you don't want to, mess around with the phone. Well, there we go. Just forget the phone, right? Now you can just use gestures with sensors. I think NFC is going to be a big one as soon as the iPhone gets it. There's a startup that has a business card that has kind of NFCs where you can kind of just quickly like bump. I mean, it's kind of like bump, only it just works better and it's more universal and it's a standardized technology. But as soon as the iPhone adopts it, being able to have your phone really just sense things as you're moving about, it will become greater and even more interesting applications will come around. And this was in a Lego store in Norway with a 3D hologram, which is awesome. And he says he could just sit there and watch that for hours and hours, which I agree. So holograms potentially coming around. I don't know, maybe that's a little too future. But let's talk about some hardware trends. So to me, sustainable, creating things that are more sustainable, right? So here's a phone that off one AA works like for months, right? So think about other areas besides the US where power outlets are somewhat abundant, not always fully abundant. So think about energy, think about markets where power is a premium or devices that are critical for day-to-day work. Collaborative, they're calling this the People Project, where they're building a series of things for bike riders and messengers, and they're actually, the whole process of design and development is up for collaboration with the general public, and they're able to do things through surveys about what they like and don't like, so they're building things collaboratively. Pixelless, it's funny how with Retina displays, and here LG has fit a whole HD display in something the size of an iPhone. Pixels are finally gone, which is pretty interesting. Printable. This is a $600 3D printer, which I think once the 3D printer movement happens, and I think it will happen, you'll be able to print your Legos at home, which is a whole new business model for Lego, because they'll start selling you little files that you download and then print yourself, right? Think about disrupting the business model that way. But you're able to print components and print pieces of hardware that you could actually prototype with.
Accessible forms of traditional programming often present obstacles to too many potential inventors. That's where ModKit Micro comes in. ModKit Micro is the easiest way to program a growing list of popular prototyping platforms, from Arduino to wiring, making prototyping interactive objects easy for anyone. We built ModKit Micro from the ground up so that the experience starts the second you plug your prototyping hardware into your computer. From there, you can set up your hardware visually by dragging any components and telling ModKit Micro how they are connected. Once your hardware is configured, you can move to Blocks View and build a program by dragging little puzzle pieces together. But with ModKit Micro, you're not limited to graphical
blocks. So it's kind of this, do-it-yourself, kind of really modular, small pieces of hardware that you can kind of connect, and then through usually easy programming, you can actually have it do anything. It's really, again, up to you, right? Flexible. So here again is a surface-like table, but instead it's made with kind of like a cloth. It's able to detect depth, right? And so as you change depth, so the UI control here is as you're changing depth, it actually is showing the different, inside the body or just playing around. And transparent. And so it's been developed. We have transparent touchscreens now. So when you could see both through it and on each side of it, what can you do with an LCD screen? So how do you design the future, right? Again, I think the definition of design thinking is part of that: empathy, creativity, rationality. But I think it's all about kind of keeping an eye on trends, keeping an eye on what's happening in the future, and then it's up to you, right? You here are all the designers and developers who will make these things become reality, and I'm very excited to see what you guys do next. So, and that's the end.
We've got time for questions, so if you have a question, just raise your hand and I'll bring the mic to you.
And we have gifts to give away for the first question. Which is that gentleman there with the microphone?
So, Jeremy, can you talk a little bit about discoverability with gestures? Like, I know with the iPad, the gestures on there, mostly just power users that use them. It's not just the general public.
Well, so there's the natural user interface, right? And this is where I have young kids, and it's been very interesting to see my young kids use the iPad, and it's very interesting to see me not give them any instruction whatsoever, and my 2.5-year-old can open the iPad, find a game he wants, open a game. Certain car games he could actually use depending on what their device mechanism. It's funny because the games that actually replicate an old world controller, he finds difficult. Games that actually are more like you're touching the car and moving it, he's fine with and excels at. So I mean, I think it's think back to what's actually natural for someone to do, and try to move in that direction if at all possible. The Connect stuff is difficult because do you naturally do this or do you naturally do this, right? Probably not. I don't know. So there is some, but you do touch things and grab things and you do point at things, and so it's thinking about like what do you actually naturally do, and then is there a way to infuse that into the UI or the experience? Yes. Oh, sorry. Are we waiting for the mic? Faster.
Hi. My television just went out. Should I buy a smart TV? Why would I want a smart TV?
So smart TV is more of this connected device, right? So now your TV is connected with potentially Netflix, the weather. I am kind of a gadget geek, so I do have a smart TV, although I find the experiences on the smart TVs usually are not as good as other products like the Apple TV, for instance. So I find myself where I was using Netflix via my smart TV, I'm now using it on the Apple TV instead. So it's there's actually the Worldwide Developer Conference is coming up for Apple in 2 weeks. I think the 11th is the keynote. There are rumors that an Apple TV may be coming out. So it'd be interesting to see what Apple does with that. And it's kind of funny because I actually think there are actually some TV examples I didn't have in here that are using the Kinect or Kinect-like things. So where you're actually kind of moving through applications and shows and channels, using movements. And that's one thing that's kind of interesting is Apple doesn't really have that. So if the world does turn to more a gesture-based thing, Microsoft is actually better positioned in that model than Apple is. But Apple's better positioned from almost every other angle possible. But no, I would say every TV today has that, so you're probably going to get one. Will you use it, or will it be better than other things you could buy? No. So you'll probably be better off with an Apple TV hooked up to a less expensive TV. I bought a 3D TV recently, a plasma TV, and at first I thought I was going to use it quite a bit, and then I realized over time that I don't want to get the glasses out. So until they really have like true 3D, like glassless 3D, I will probably not really use it to its potential. So anyways.
So you mentioned that real quickly, and I think it's the elephant in the room here. And I want to hear more about what you think. There's a kind of a suspicious absence of haptic feedback, of tactile feedback in all of these. And I was just wondering what your opinion is on that.
Yeah. So like in that study, they said that, whereas older people like the audio cues, younger people like the visual cues, they both like the touch feedback of the steering wheel that actually kind of gave haptic kind of buzzes and things when they're moving it around. There's that orb thing where like there are magnets, right? And the orb actually has some kind of resistance to it as you're moving it around. There was a pen example where you're using this pen and it's faking resistance right as you're using this pen. Kinect obviously does not have resistance, right? And I don't know of a way that it would do that. Like I don't know what thing it would do to it could pretend resistance on a screen. You could think it's being resistant, but it's not giving you that true resistance. But then it just becomes a question of like, is it still fun? Is it still interesting? Are there other reasons that I'm using this? When the Kinect first came out, I always thought, wow, where this would be great at gyms and YMCA's. Why? Because every time you go to a place that has a lot of people using video games, the controllers are a mess, and this does not have a controller. That's awesome, And is it, people still, they like the controllers over Kinect potentially, but there's specific times and cases and instances where it makes sense, even though it doesn't have that resistance that I think we all want. Yes.
Have you seen patterns for the haptic question? Sort of got this thinking for how these different methods are applied. So gestures versus touch versus speech. In terms of, you showed a lot of examples. Yep. Are there any patterns you've seen across?
So the main pattern. So there's the everything is a screen, everything is a view, everything is a sensor. The one thing that to me they all kind of do is this free flow of data and this connectedness, right? Which is actually unrelated kind of to the UI part of it. But it's that it knows, it's sensing that I am here. I mean, instead of me having a MacBook, what if this was a dumb terminal? I walk up, it knows it's me. Boom, there's my computer. It's in the cloud, right? So I mean, it's that. I think everyone wants all of our data to be connected at all times. There are certain companies that can monetize that well and would also like to help us do that. That's the one true pattern I've seen across like a lot of these bigger vision kind of things. Other than that, it's people kind of mixing and matching where they feel appropriate for whatever the experience is. So. Anything else? Yes. The mic is coming.
Okay. Can you hear? While thinking about the presentation, one question came to mind. I would like to hear your thoughts on the following topic. With all of these ideas in place, we of course look forward into what would the world be like if these were implemented everywhere. Yep. But my question is about privacy, about humans managing their own lives. Right. I mean, just like you had the thing about the fitness device sending out more information than people bargained for. What happens if your glasses, due to a mistake you did by tapping twice or whatever, sends out something very personal messages everywhere? What's your thoughts on privacy when everything is aware?
Yeah, it's more. I mean, I think it's already starting to get more difficult, and it's already a problem with the things we have today, and it'll continue to be problems with things we have tomorrow. Like with Facebook, I saw someone post that they're willing to pay Facebook monthly if you just give me some good privacy controls, right? And I could just do a better job of managing my privacy. So yeah, like comes to mind I don't like geotagging photos near my house, right? I'd rather people not know what happens in my house or where I live. And so Flickr actually came out with a thing called geofencing. Well, Flickr didn't come out; it was out. But Flickr implemented a thing called geofencing, so I could actually block off my house, and any photo I take and I post to Flickr, it won't post the geo coordinates when I'm in that barrier, right? So there's a case where I could say, like, when I'm at work, which may have sensitive projects, or when I'm here doing this thing, don't do this or don't do that, right? So really, it's about us as